Welcome to Trench Diaries. This is Blood, Dust and Snow, Chapter 21. December the 20th, 1941, Saturday. In 4 days it will be Christmas. Our withdrawal of those divisions that had advanced too far east has ended according to the program. The 6th Panzer Division has covered the withdrawal of the 56th Army Corps towards the Lama position and has now become Corps Reserve in the area of Schachowskaya. With Sicherungsbataillon Stern, we are now based close to the intelligence officer of the division. How long we are going to be in reserve, I don't know. That can change quickly up until Christmas. We survived the withdrawal at least. I am unable to describe all the cruel days, the hardships and the drudgery. I can summarize it thus. It was the worst thing we soldiers experienced in the whole of the campaign. Now that I sit here at the table with the skat players again, I can't help thinking that it is Christmas soon and that we are still here in this paradise. 4 military policemen were staying here before us and have left a dried-out Advent wreath here. Yes, those guys actually had the time to think about stuff like this. On the march today, I walked at the head of the company on the right side of the road when a large car pulled up next to me and a monocled general looked out of the rear window. I turned around and made my report. When seeing the clean-shaven face with the monocle, the 2 stars on the braided shoulder boards, I realized at once that this was none other than General Reinhardt, the commander of the Panzergruppe. I reported as such, 5th Company, Panzer-Regiment 11, currently on foot on the march to the assembly area of 6th Panzer Division at Schachowskaya. He asked me a few questions relating to our deployment and then raced on. This afternoon, Tutasch and Müller, my old comrades in arms, came round. Soon our whole old 5th Company sat in the room together. With a bottle of schnapps and a few of champagne, we toasted the successful withdrawal. Like that, we sat there for a long time chatting away. I can't keep my eyes open anymore, I am too tired. Last night's march is having an effect. I wish I could switch positions with Unteroffizier Geier, who is again unable to sleep today. That's it, I've had enough. Time for bed. December the 21st, 1941, Sunday. This morning I first enjoyed a nice cup of actual coffee. I received a few parcels with the post 2 days ago, and the contents reminded me of the comrades in the old manor that yet another week had passed. It is also the 4th Sunday of Advent, the last before Christmas. Wittkötter, my old loader, had been sent a few pieces of ham from home and used some of it to make a sandwich for me. It tasted wonderful. Then I was called to Hille. Always the same old story. One always has to say farewell when it's most comfortable. An advance party has just set out to secure new quarters for us in a different village. Of course, I had just given my laundry to the woman here in the house. Damn it! And my laundry is in dire need of a wash. The morning's control sweep had located a range of lice and nits. It makes me want to cry. One has done the utmost to keep as clean as possible. With my naked ass I have stood outside every morning brushing out the impractical black trousers. I've washed and groomed myself, and now, during this lousy withdrawal, where there was no time to wash, the beasts immediately move into one's pants. It helps to know that I am not alone. All Lancers search their clothing in the morning, and most of them with results. It will get better one day. Yesterday, Tutasch and Müller were here with the bottle of schnapps. We have invited them to come over again and to spend Christmas with us. Now, that has fallen through completely, as it looks we'll be back in action over Christmas. There are rumors making the rounds that Brauchitsch has resigned. I don't know if that is true. In the last few days there have been plenty of rumors. Tobruk hasn't been lost after all, and Singapore hasn't either. I am wondering what will become of us. During the withdrawal we were forced to burn the mail of other divisions, as there was no way we could have taken it with us. In other cases, starving Lancers have torn open the parcels and abandoned mail transports in the hope of finding something edible in the contents. The letters were just stomped into the snow. Disgusting. Just as disgusting is that they abandoned a baggage lorry. I saw how the Lancers ripped open the officers' chests, surgical and medicine boxes in the search for food. Many just took things which in that moment might have appeared valuable to them, and only a few days later, when things had shown themselves to be useless, they too were trampled into the dirt. I will not talk about this withdrawal. I am not diplomatic enough to smooth these events, the greatest mess I have ever experienced, over with words, and I want to avoid being court-martialed as a mutineer. On Monday morning in Tachochowka, I was so mentally and physically broken that I collapsed. After that night's march, I couldn't go on anymore, and after I had reached the house of the intelligence officer, I just fell over. Even with lots of bean coffee and Röchter's 97% volume schnapps, I only regained my feet after 2 days. The field gendarmes also failed miserably during the withdrawal. They should focus on regulating sexual intercourse instead of the vehicle trafficking of an entire corps. Without the help of officers and old pursers of combat units, they would have failed miserably to organize and guide the wild columns. In many cases, the gendarmes just ran away when they feared they would be cut off. The worst swinishness, however, was that the 23rd Infantry Division never held its rearguard position and always withdrew prematurely. This allowed the Russians to encircle us afresh every day, while the horse-drawn vehicles of the Sprinters Guard then fell back on the same road which our corps was withdrawing on, thus greatly adding to the traffic chaos. And when the sledges and carts attempted to cut past the traffic across the fields, they very often ran into mines. While I was lying flat in Tachochova, at least 10 mines exploded. The withdrawal was conducted with such speed and haste that the dead remained mostly unburied. We all had become so apathetic. Often I had come past the corpses of fallen comrades who had been killed by bomb splinters and strafing. When the Ratas and Curtis came, the soldiers didn't even bother to return fire anymore. That is hardly surprising if one has an empty stomach in this kind of freezing cold. All the more astonishing and laudable is the conduct of our riflemen who covered the withdrawal as a last-ditch rearguard. Always surrounded with frozen limbs, nothing to eat and little ammunition, they halted the exploiting Russian forces and inflicted severe casualties on them in counter-thrusts. Schützenregiment 2 is said to have suffered great casualties at Teterino, and the 2 commanders and the adjutant who relieved us at 2400 hours were killed at 0600 in the morning when the Russians attacked the village with a whole regiment and 17 tanks. There we can see how much luck we have had. Hille says it's only due to Hauptmann Stern that we didn't have casualties like Hans Koch during attacks and counterattacks. December the 22nd, 1941, Monday. It was just typical that we were forced to leave our quarters in Shachovskaya in the dead of night to make room for some staff formation of the Gruppe. Only rarely have I cursed so much as in this night when we set out in the darkness and a snowstorm. We were hardly able to find our route, and I, being the translator, had to go and ask some Russians for the way. We all felt like we had been banished to Siberia and shared the hate for all those above company command level who sat with their fat bellies at a warm stove. As we stomped through the snow, which is already lying at knee height, we came past another group of men wrapped up into their coats, bracing the freezing snow with gritted teeth just like we were. We shouted over to them, loudly cursing the snow, the roads and the whole war in general. First, they didn't reply, but then one man among the group shouted back, "Wojna nix good," which means war isn't good. Now we realized that these comrades in suffering deep in the snow on the other side were Russian prisoners. This march gave me ample time to again think about the reason why there are always 2 groups of men cursing and execrating the war moving through the world. On one side we now have kolkhoz farmers, metal workers and butchers, on the other fitters, farmers' sons, merchants and craftsmen. Both sides share the same amount of suffering and grief, and every day it is this or the other group which has to bleed more. I tell my men that this is about the reshaping of Europe, the creation and protection of German Lebensraum, the absolute defeat of Bolshevism, the enemy of the people. But have I myself really taken these slogans to heart? Am I myself convinced by what I try to explain to my men so convincingly? Again and again, it is damn hard to get my own head around the fact that everything we are being ordered to do here is right and for the benefit of not only our people. It is true that such a war is an eye-opener, even more so when one has experienced the bad sides of a campaign and when the war drags on and on. But I can't help saying to myself, in moments when I profoundly fail to make sense of it all, that Hitler, when he let us loose on the Russians, had already been through the same kind of crap himself, which didn't make a lot of sense then. On the face of it, it is quite obvious, and from the perspective of the beer table strategists, those deferred from military service and Ortsgruppenleiter, all this here makes sense. But ask a serious man who doesn't just repeat the slogans and who has repeatedly put his own neck on the line if he at times didn't have the same thought. As far as I can tell, all of them did so. Now we only have the wish that they will leave us alone at Christmas. Again and again, this is what I hear from the men. Otherwise, we're all only thinking from one day to the other, but in this particular instance, we are all thinking 3 days ahead. We are now under command of Oberleutnant Limbrun, who has already given us plenty to be angry about in the summer. It was also due to him that we had to set out into the freezing night. This damned Eastern Front whinger has completely misdeployed us at Leningrad and repeatedly sent us on night attacks. The whole platoon is sitting in a nice clean farm cottage together with the company squad. It has already been announced that this 15-house village will also serve as quarters for the staff company. It seems we'll all have to move closer together. But the most important thing is that on Christmas we'll have a roof over our heads. How frugal we have become. We don't even think about celebrating with our families anymore and don't waste a thought about going home at the start of the new year. Funny, I am writing here like I am in the little tank gunner Pimpelhofer and not a Prussian lieutenant who can look back on such a great number of soldier ancestors that it puts even antiquity to shame. Am I really such a little Philistine that the experiences here are turning me into a pacifist? And even in the face of all these great role models, the Prussian lieutenants and the Friderician Fähnrichs, who all knew how to die so nobly, this isn't my ideal. A hero's death? That's a fraud. A hero's life? That's what it should be. There's nothing heroic in death. Only life lived until the final beat of the heart can be heroic. Dying is easy. I have often secretly wished for such a deliverance when I was morally broken, up to the neck in the dirt, only to abandon the thought again. It's this little spark which reignites me in the last moment, reminds me of my duty and obligation, and pushes me back onto the path of true Prussian traditions. First day of Christmas, 1941. I have thrown some work at the boss's feet, and that was in relation to the distribution of Iron Crosses. We have received 8 Iron Crosses, which are supposed to go to those men who have distinguished themselves during the withdrawal, where, thanks to Stern's tactics, we had no contact with the enemy as we used to have in the old days. Second day of Christmas, December the 26th, 1941. Soon we are supposed to head outside to shovel snow, but the coffee isn't ready yet and it is just too cold. Even the field kitchen doesn't heat properly anymore with temperatures below minus 30 degrees centigrade. In addition, there is a howling snowstorm. Well, it will surely be fun when our bones start to freeze. But Stern, so it appears to me at least, is keen to keep us occupied. When we have finished with the snow, we'll probably be transferred away. At the moment, Oberst Koll with 1,000 men is on the way here. He's supposed to build a supply road for the corps and to establish a second defensive line. Just like during the First War, we are building bunkers and positions like the Hindenburg Line. I would like to know how the gentlemen see that happening during this frost and with the ground being as hard as stone. In the furthermost line, the Organisation Tod is working with several battalions. We are now supposed to spend winter here. One really has to switch to stubborn mode when thinking about the coming period. I try to say to myself that there have been generations who have been through even worse times. And what they managed to do, we can do as well. One day there will be peace again, peace on earth, of the kind the angels pray for on Holy Night. Can one even imagine this after 2 years of war, nights without blackout, no more war on all fronts? At least we could properly celebrate Christmas. In the morning we had to clear a path through the snow, a task which we finished at 1300 hours. Then we went home, where Laufenberg and Misha, the owner of the house, had hewn a Christmas tree out of a fir tree 10 meters tall. None of us had ever seen a more glorious one. A wonderful tree hung thickly with fir cones, which we then started to decorate in a simple and tasteful manner. Our supply officer Bethke issued an extra ration and, in addition, cognac and liquor. From some recently arrived parcels, I had saved a few sweets and a package of sugar from home to make a proper grog with. Small trifles like this reminded the whole platoon that at home the season of affectionate secrecies had begun. I had only managed to prepare a small parcel for Erich Lehmann and for my old loader and batman Wittkötter. For the latter, I had added a 20-mark note for his loyal services, which he ogled with great delight once he had eaten his way to the bottom of the box. Wrenger, the wireless operator, had managed to save an accordion through the withdrawal. Lauer knew how to play it, and the music, together with Unteroffizier Greger's baritone voice, added much to the festivity of the evening. Actually, the evening passed way too quickly. Amid the singing, the grog, and the liquor under the beautiful Christmas tree, one hardly noticed how quickly the time passed. I didn't want to launch into a long speech. I had said that to the men too, but I nevertheless said a few words, particularly as we hadn't expected such large quantities of alcohol. I wanted to avoid some of the men drowning their sorrows with alcohol, and indeed we did not manage to avoid the usual piss-up. We did, however, manage to get over the fact that we couldn't be with our families on the day which is so deeply important for us Germans. The village, by the way, is ideally situated for the event, like in a fairy tale, deep up in a forest. The tiny area of arable land is surrounded by tall, dark fir trees, while the dozen or so small cottages along the road are also nestled into the shadows of the enormous trees, as if they were trying to find shelter from the howling snowstorm. A proper Christmas village, this Reschichte, although Father Christmas did surely have a tough time getting there using the snow-covered roads. To make sure he at least stood a chance of doing so, we had to spend Christmas morning outside shoveling snow. Many Russian aircraft were about, Ratas and bombers. What happened to our aerial superiority? I can't help thinking about the Spanish pilots who let the expensive and now much desired Messerschmitts fall into Russian hands. Damn this withdrawal. The losses were catastrophic. I wonder if the story about Brauchitsch is true. As I have only recently met Reinhard, the commander of the 56th Corps, I know that he hasn't been relieved of his post. So, whose fault is all this? On December the 22nd, General Raus had issued an order which hinted at spending the winter here and asked for increased readiness. A similar order came down from the division, which stated the need to build a defensive system and to switch over to sledge traffic. We've used sledges for a while already, but our 2 horses apparently froze to death when the team was out to collect petrol. Somewhere, one of our carts loaded with fuel had got stuck in the snow, and so all the sledges of the Abteilung were sent out to collect the petrol cans. The snowstorm that's raging today was so bad that even the pannier horses perished in it. We humans could hardly survive out there. It is simply horrible. Faces frozen, hands, feet as well, and that way we are supposed to work and clear the roads, which snow covers again as soon as one is finished. There are always several men who are sick. In recent days, mostly stomach ailments. We are all suffering from the damned runs, but there's nothing we can do against it. We did, however, construct a proper privy back here in the barn, but some of the sick men can't even get as far as that. At the moment, Obergefreiter Kronke is lying next to me in the corner here with a temperature of 40.2 degrees. On the floor next to the barrack oven, Röhlen is lying on the floor squirming with pain. I am just waiting for the day when the lice will give us typhus. At the moment, we are only struggling with dysentery and influenza. If we get typhus on top of that, it will get really bad. Just now, Stabsarzt Möschler was here to check in on Kronke and the other sick men. If only we had proper clothing. In his leather footwear, the German Lancer is literally freezing his feet off. In this cold, the Russians are wearing useful felt boots which they can pull up over their knees. That way, they can make their way through the snow which so easily enters our lace-up shoes and the shafts of our jackboots. The thick headscarves of the women and the ear-flap caps of the men are the only useful headgear, and while we are amused to see the Russians on the Leningrad front wearing quilted jackets and trousers in summer, now we would be happy to have them. None of the Russian pieces of clothing look nice, but they are all practical. And if all our transport units replace their motor vehicles with sledges, we'd surely make better progress. Instead, they are all stuck somewhere in the landscape, leaving us to find other means of supplying us with ammunition, food and petrol. At the moment, no one knows where our luggage is either. It is a mystery. December the 27th, 1941. Saturday. Misha, the mujik and master of the house, speaks German. He seems to have a few words picked up from us, and I had to laugh, and he came to me to ask for their meaning. Vasily Vasilievich, kak po-ruski? What does this mean in Russian? This is a damned mess, god damn it. During the night I had to consider that we are supposed to stay here through the entire winter. Surely we'll get replacements and new vehicles, and when new operations are possible again in the coming spring, we'll launch attacks which will destroy the Siberian Army of the East. I will be there until an anti-tank gun, an aerial bomb, a shell or a mine puts a full stop after the last sentence of my life story. If I could see into the future, if only. Wilhelm Lope is gone too now, and I am the only friend and officer who has been with me since the start of the campaign. But I will continue to do my duty. I will be as stubborn as a cartridge pouch up to the final outage. Then I will have had my campaign, for which I have yelled so much after Poland and France. Gosh, at the moment I am so fed up again. There is no way our division will get out of Russia anytime soon. Now the only thing we can do is to endure it. My new motto is, the front clicks and the Heimat is happy. Although clicking here is done with 2 thumbnails and between them there is a tiny animal. Our new Schlager, I want a photo of yourself, no matter if it's small. Always yours, always yours. A wonderfully corny song. We are singing it with fanatical stupidity at any possible opportunity. Okay, listeners, Jay here. This is a quick intermission because the diary at this point, the next 2 weeks that is, only consists of a few snippets which don't lend themselves very well to reading out loud. Things like where they are going, how many casualties they have, what they are eating, and apparently some guy is regularly ranting about the Nazis. The diary continues on January the 14th, 1942. We have many visitors here in the Russian cottage, in which I am now staying with Wittkötter after my return to the remains of our 5th company. As it's comfortably close to the road, they come in to warm themselves up. They are a good source of news. One thing they told me is that 3 days ago the Russians were 10 kilometers away from Lichevka, apparently the dump from 2 sides. I have to admit that this shocked me. Does it still make any sense to preserve the whole drama here for posterity in my diary? Even if we manage, against my expectations, to stop the Russian advance, then no one needs to know more than necessary about the hammering we have received here in the central sector of the front. And if we fail to stop them, even with the troops currently arriving from France, and if the Russians close the pocket at Vyazma, advance further and take all that territory from us, then this will be the beginning of the end. This is how I see it, at least with my December mood, which isn't very rosy. I hope I am wrong with the second prognosis. That would be just horrible. All our sacrifices would have been in vain. I find it hard even to try to explain how this setback had come about. I have thought about it several times, and if it wasn't the urgent desire of the party, then surely they were forced into the attempt to achieve a prestigious victory at all cost by the pressure of press and propaganda. And then it all got out of hand when winter set in early, while at the same time their army from the Far East made an appearance in front of our weakened divisions. We all struggle to explain this outright failure of those above in any other way. And what else could one call it but outright failure? Hopefully, I am looking too much at the black side. These days, we old fighters have ample time to sit together and babble about this messy situation. After the chaotic days around the new year, I have ended up here with the remains of 2nd Abteilung, currently led by Theo Langenbruch. I'm trying to recover a bit from the days of our infantry-style deployment in December. But that will turn sour should all the staff of Army Group 9, which has fled from Reth, try to spread out here in the village. Even Oberst Koll can't do much for us anymore, as he himself has been burdened with the role of traffic officer and, with all his staff, is going to be deployed at Smolensk. In addition, we are supposed to be some kind of palace guard for the staff of Army Group 3, guard company together with the remains of Panzer-Regiment 65. Oberleutnant Baum, however, who used to command 65 and is well connected, is being transferred to the Führerbegleitbattalion Battalion to take command of its tank company. He is the same kind of character as Zangenmeister. The other companies of 65 under Hauptmann Anhalt have been deployed to build supply roads and bunker lines. As it turns out, there haven't been so many missing as we thought when we were at Timkovo at New Year. Now there are 15 men classed as missing. They are unlikely to return. The company had 14 dead, most of whom could not be buried, and the graves of those who were are now in Russian hands since Birkino on the Lama and Anamino have been given up. Funny, as it's just there where they started building a line of bunkers. It's pathetic. Where do they want to stop the Russians now, once they are past those villages? They can just march through now where there is no more line to stop them. I can't follow it all anymore. The Russians here in the villages are disgusting and evil-minded. For the whole time they've been friendly like kittens, and now, when they realize that the Russians have been reinforced for the defense of Moscow, the rebel is getting brazen. Well, I can change my tune as well. Time to introduce a tougher regime for the scum. Wittkötter is lying here on a stretcher next to me and is groaning in his sleep. In his dreams he might still be fighting the Russians at Timkovo. I think I am also groaning in my sleep again, just as I did after October the 4th. But that is just a reaction of my nerves. A Prussian lieutenant has to carry on regardless. Nerves, that's something only people like Zangenmeister and Neuling can afford to have. And even if Hille tried to pull himself together, that was over in Timkovo. Bleeding hell, I mustn't even think about those hours at the Kolchos anymore. Of our 19 men inside the barn in Timkovo, only 7 managed to come out alive, and of those, several were wounded. Hase, who had his lower arm shattered, Unteroffizier Weil shot through both of his legs and both hands frozen. Weeskamp was hit by a splinter and is in hospital. Only Röhlin, Liesmann, Lauer and I were unscathed. I am amazed that Liesmann had already felt the dramatic events on the morning of the New Year approaching while we were sitting around that tiny fire in the bitter cold night. Bechberger, Dreher, Endermann, Heine, what has become of them? I hope they didn't have a fate like that Unteroffizier of the 106 Infantry Division who had been so kind to take us in and who was shot off the sledge the following morning and was left lying in the snow with freezing arms and legs. I hope that all our wounded got out of Birkenau. The hours we spent there in Timkovo, which we were to hold at all costs, are now again passing by my mind's eye in all their horrible detail. The night in the potato cellar, the artillery and mortar fire, the Russian tanks which were running in exactly those conditions which we use as an excuse for the failure of our own buckets. The terrible yelling of the attacking Russians, the many unburied fallen, the wounded at the collection points. Werner, shot through the lung, lying in the sled next to the dead man. The moment when Stabsarzt Prinz and the Oberfeldwebel medic Schulenburg were trying to skedaddle. Esser and Geier, my dear good corporals, both wounded but facing the enemy until their final moment came. Laufenberg, who ran out to recover the wounded infantryman on the corner of the barn and was shot through the head while doing so. That's the end of it. I hope, for the men and myself, hours such as this will never ever come again.
A time of reflection for our man here. After driving around in his unstoppable machine and then being stuck in a workshop waiting for repairs, he has now become an infantryman. And it shows that he isn't trained for it, so much so that he simply passed out after one particularly tiring march. In fact, you can tell his whole demeanor is changing, from hyper-motivated true believer to simply surviving and thinking about home as well as the fallen friends he had to let go. And it certainly won't get better, as you know. Well, we'll see how he manages in the next episode. Cheers.